to the 5th installment of the Voices of Rondo podcast, hosted by the ReConnect Rondo Youth Council. I'm Rafi Karpowitz. I am a ReConnect Rondo intern, podcast host, member of the Youth Council.
My name is Moises. I'm a senior at Brooklyn Center High School. I'm very excited to be here.
My name is Javi. I'm also excited to be here, especially with Rafi back.
I am back. It's very exciting.
Freshman college student.
I've been away. It's been a semester, but back here. Today we are going to talk about a few things. First of all, there was a recent release of several potential options for developing the I-94 highway in a corridor between Marion Street and downtown St. Paul and downtown Minneapolis. So it's like an 8-mile stretch. And so there's a lot that could go on there, and we'll discuss some of those potential options. We're also going to talk about the importance of thinking about community involvement with such plans, because it's so important to have community input on that kind of thing. And finally, we're going to show some examples from across the country where maybe the community has not been so involved. And as in the past of this podcast, we have discussed places that have been affected in a similar way that Rondo has. And so we're going to talk about some of those. We're going to talk about Overtown, Miami, and we're going to talk about the Independence Heights and Fifth Ward neighborhoods in Houston. And so Moises can kick us off with a discussion of Minnesota Department of Transportation.
So what's in the report that came out a few months ago? Well, it's 8 different plans to kind of reconfigure, rethink I-94. And one of the proposals, interestingly, is one we covered last episode, which is similar to the one in Treme, which is to pretty much raise the highway and replace it with a 2-lane boulevard with dedicated public transportation lanes. So let's discuss that option.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
This is, like you said, something that's similar to what is being suggested by the Claiborne Avenue Coalition in Treme, New Orleans.
Right.
To take down kind of their elevated highway and replace it with this kind of boulevard, which will have fewer lanes and potentially more options for public transportation. And so this definitely seems like an important step, like a potential way to think about this going forward.
Oh, and disclaimer, these are our views, personal views. These are not ReConnect Rondo's views.
Of course.
Proposals. Yeah.
And so I think one of the things which I would maybe have a question about is how much was there actually community involvement in thinking about these decisions, right? Because we know with the land bridge, what we've been talking about, and with ReConnect Rondo's kind of idea of how to transform the landscape of the highway around the Rondo neighborhood, there have been extensive discussions with community members and trying to kind of gauge how the public will, and how those residents of Rondo specifically will want to go forward. And so I guess my question would be, it doesn't seem like there's as much engagement with the people who are actually going to be affected in some of these plans.
I think that's probably like the most important part about these projects. Not even just specifically in Rondo, having the community voices and the community involvement in these huge plans for what it's just going to be like the generations to come. It's their future, basically. And it doesn't need to be the older generations dictating what goes there or like what goes on the land bridge, for example. It's just really important to have the future voices, front and center, I suppose, which is what we're all about.
Exactly.
So now there are other proposals in the report, not that important, just like maintenance, maybe adding some bus lanes here and there. But one that got some heat was the expansion proposal, which puts out to expand the freeway from a 3 to 4 lane highway to a 5-lane highway.
Right.
So this got some heat. A council member from St. Paul, her name is Mitra Jalai. She said, and I'm paraphrasing here, like, why is this even an option? Why is this being put out there? Since the goal of these plans is to increase equity and climate resiliency. So that's crazy how and I agree with her, that's being put out there. What do y'all think?
Just to be completely clear, we're talking about expanding I-95
I-94.
I-94. You know what I meant.
Yeah, no, exactly.
I-95 is
The highway that we don't like.
Yeah.
Considering the fact that, okay, there's a school. I don't know exactly what it's called, but it's like right down the street, and it's an elementary school. I think.
Oh.
It's got a playground on it. It's got a little basketball court, all the equipment and stuff like that for kids to play on, and that is right next to the highway.
Right.
Like right next to it, smack dab. There's the only thing separating it is like a gate in a street, with barely like a one-way street.
Yeah.
So needless to say, it's insanely close to the highway, as it is. And on top of that, there's at least one church. There's a bunch of houses, and it's not like you can just expand this one section of the highway.
Right. They're talking about
You're
a
gonna
7.5
have to
mile
go
stretch from downtown St. Paul to downtown Beatrice. So that's a lot of people live there.
I think that's just like people begging history to repeat itself.
Right.
Yeah. And, I think there will often be this discussion when, time comes to think about what to do with the highway. Well, traffic's pretty bad.
Right.
How do we deal with this? Everyone wants to get where they're going faster.
Right.
Why not expand it so that it eases traffic, so that it allows people to go more quickly, more freely?
Makes sense.
Right.
At first.
You would think. But that's not how it works, actually. Like, it's interesting, but there have been extensive kind of studies, and there has been research done to see, is this really the case? Is this how you most effectively can reduce traffic in a highway? By adding lanes, by increasing the capacity of the highway itself? And the answer is no, it's not. This is kind of centered around this idea of induced demand, right? And so the premise here is that if you build more lanes and expand the highway, it's simply over a matter of time, few years, or maybe even shorter, going to simply encourage more people to use the highway, and you're going to be back right where you started.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a sustainable approach. Maybe it'll be a very, very short-term fix, but that's not what we're going for here. These highways last decades and decades. And so there's actually been some serious research done. There's the Journal of Transportation Policy, which has conducted, there have been papers published multiple times, one in 1998 and then another one in 2019. Both of these showing that clearly looking at highway systems across the country, increasing lanes does not reduce the amount of traffic in the long term. I think one of them said over 5 years, you're right back to where you started.
Yeah, and there's a real world example of that in Houston. It's called the Katy Freeway. It's the biggest highway in North America, going at 26 lanes. Okay? That's 13 lanes for each way.
It's a bit much.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more than a bit much.
Yeah. And it didn't even keep the status quo. It didn't reduce traffic. It increased it.
Right.
Roughly 30 to 50% increase.
Yeah.
So that just goes to show, there's real world examples of this. And honestly, expanding freeways, that's an old idea that needs to be cast away.
Right. And there was this quote from one of the papers that I was looking at, which said, increasing road capacity in congested conditions can even make congestion worse.
Right, yeah.
And this was in 1998.
Right.
And we've, only built more highways since then. And so you can just see what's happened. The Katy Freeway being a prime example.
Speaks for itself.
Now, the MnDOT folks wanted to include the whole universe of possible ideas.
Right.
So that includes expanding, that includes reducing, that includes the boulevard option. So eventually, some proposals will be dropped and kind of, get a more refined framework. But, why would we expanding the freeways really? Also, I gotta mention this, that the reason why the land bridge is not on the MnDOT report is because it's not really affecting the highway much at all. It's just putting
like a cap
over it, just putting a shadow over it pretty much, making it into a tunnel. So just gotta get out the way if people out there wondering.
When we were at that conference thing, the Wilder, and there was that guy, and not to be like, oh, it's white man, but it was a white man who was talking about something about making the buildings on the land bridge into somewhat of like a smart city kind of.
Oh,
which
yeah. I never thought about that.
Like,
Yeah.
defeats the purpose of not wanting to gentrify this area and not wanting to. Okay.
Rondo doesn't need to be a smart
Right.
city.
Exactly. I think the main goal is reparations instead of like city of the future.
Completely transforming.
Exactly.
It, yeah. That's like 100% agree with you on that. So another thing to consider is the Rondo opinion, which, Rafi?
Yeah, we know from the past, and like we've said, it is so important to hear from the voices in the community. That's what we're doing here, and what ReConnect Rondo has really tried to do is to center their approach on talking with people. And it's been difficult. Like, it's hard to get a good sample of people from Rondo, actually. And it's hard to kind of do that outreach, but it's important to do that outreach. And ReConnect Rondo, I think, is really committed to that. And that is a very important first step, I think, which I'm unsure if it has been put at the forefront of many of these MnDOT proposals.
So, and I agree with you on that. MnDOT should definitely look into the communities surrounding the I-94 zone that they're thinking of redoing. But ReConnect Rondo has actually done a gentrification study. Now, it was done in 2018, I believe. Mm-hmm. And the racial makeup of the study goes as follows. 51% white, 16% people of color, and 30% no response. Now, ReConnect Rondo has addressed these limitations, right? Of like how only 20% of the response are from Rondo.
Right.
And only 60% identified as POC. But this study generally takes the surrounding area of where the land bridge is going to be.
Right. These were questions that were asked to people who were at various ReConnect Rondo events.
Yeah.
Hosted throughout Rondo, but welcome to anybody to come from St. Paul or wherever. And so obviously they have this representative sample, which is 20%, like you said, of Rondo. And so again, I think we've talked in the past about the difficulty of actually reaching out to people and getting the input of the people that you really want, because so often you hear certain opinions over others, even when they're not really the opinions of everybody. And so while I think like what Moises said is there are some limitations here, and I think ReConnect Rondo acknowledges that. They have to work harder, and we have to be better at finding ways to connect with people. This study is also a good marker for many things. It's good for gauging general sentiments about the land bridge and about what concerns are, right? And so there were some clear things that were highlighted by participants, even if they weren't necessarily all Rondo residents.
And those highlights are, that study found that out of all the negative possible outcomes, the most would be, or that people thought the negative outcomes would be gentrification. Mm-hmm. And the second to that would be a raise of property taxes, which obviously makes housing less affordable. Mm-hmm. So there are also 2 points made by community members where some want the land bridge to have houses on top, and another point is that people want it to be just green space. So Rondo needs to do more in getting really the sentiment of what Rondo thinks, and we actually have been to some events and they actually seeked out what people want on the land bridge. We were picking out pictures of
Yeah, I think that was a really cool exercise, actually.
Yeah.
Because they they took like a bunch of sheets. There was a bunch of different tables, little stations that you could just walk around and look at. And they all had sheets on the table with pictures, and they gave everybody like a little palette of stickers. And basically you just put a sticker on the ones you liked. And there was a lot of like good ideas as well as not good ideas. But one thing that really like instantly caught my attention was, I think there was one table and it was like showing the cities and how we want the streets to look, kind of.
Yeah.
And I really liked the ideas that were more geared towards like walkable cities.
Right.
And things that had a lot of green space and things to bike on, or just, like I said, to walk on instead of being so automobile focused.
Right.
And actually, I think there was only one column of that little, like, it wasn't a little sheet, it was a big poster sheet, but there was one column of it that was just like straight walkable stuff, like walkable cities. And then the rest of it was what you'd see normally. Just like roads and all that, just normal stuff you'd see going downtown. But why wouldn't we just want to walk? Like, why don't we just want to walk places and instead of spending all this money on gas, instead of, I wouldn't call it wasting time, I guess, because cars are very, like
convenient in some ways.
Convenient, yeah.
But there are lots of ways that living in a city where you can get to everything by bike or by walk is just so much more calming and just would be preferable.
Connects you to your community.
Yeah. And the land bridge will connect both sides of the I-94 trench, increase walkability between the both sides. So I would definitely do that.
Never heard it called that before.
What?
A trench.
I mean, that's what it is.
No,
right?
That's absolutely what it is. It's
Big
just
trench.
like in my mind, I guess I've never really put those two.
Hey, we learn something new every day, right?
Yeah. I think it's important to mention, we touched on this a little bit, the MnDOT report basically did not include the land bridge as one of the potential options. They have said that they're going to continue collaborating with Rondo. And it's also, they've said that the land bridge that's being proposed is not something that would directly impact the traffic flow, right? And so there is this continued collaboration with the Minnesota Department of Transportation. And also, many of these plans can coexist with Rondo.
Definitely.
And so I think that is something to look forward to in the future.
And, another thing that MnDOT has to explore is that what are the effects of these different proposals? Will it displace anybody? Is keeping the status quo what Rondo wants? Is what any community along the I-94 stretch wants?
Right.
I think on the topic of, expansion plans and things of the such,
right?
We have two other parts of the nation that are going through similar things, but it's happening like right now.
Yeah.
It's not like, it's in the past, somewhat in the past, 1 foot in the past, 1 foot in the present, whatever, blah, blah, blah.
It's happening both. It happened in the past. Now it's happening right now.
It's still happening, is the point I'm trying to make. And those two cities would be Houston, Texas, and Overtown, which is in Florida, right?
The Miami area.
Yeah, it's near Miami.
Well, it's actually right next to it, but yeah.
Right. And similarly to Rondo, Overtown was just like a cultural melting pot of people brought from different places. I believe Overtown was founded by construction workers and rail workers who come from Jamaica, Cuba, Trinidad, Tobago?
Tobago.
No, Tobago?
I don't know.
There's different ways to say
Tobago.
it. I say Tobago, but hey, people
Lane pointed at
us.
Rafi, so I'm going to go with
Tobago? Trinidad, Tobago.
Is that what you said?
Yeah, that's what I said. I don't know. But people know what we're talking about. You know what I mean? You can Google it.
Yeah. So Overtown is called that because, you go over a railway to get there. And I think that really just solidifies the importance of transportation in that area.
Right. It's clear, we've been thinking about how transportation affects our environment, and specifically with regards to highways, right? And just the name of this town is, shows basically that is always present. Even in the 1890s, when this was found, it was railroads then. And it was how the transportation and how the, railroad had a physical marker on the landscape. You had to get over the railroad to get to this town. So you had to go to Overtown. And one more thing that I think is important about this place is that it was known, I think, as the Harlem of the South. And so this was really where jazz musicians and artists could come and perform and share their craft and work and be in a space which was, like Rondo and like so many places, such an important kind of center for African Americans.
Right.
Yeah, people like Nat King Cole and Ella Fitzgerald would perform in our local venues.
Right. And that's just, yet another parallel to Rondo.
Exactly.
We have another bustling BIPOC community filled with grocery stores, pharmacies, an ice cream parlor, lawyers' offices, and even, like a newspaper that was head by Black and brown people. And I think like the artist you mentioned also draws another parallel. Like right now we're in the ballroom, the Rondo ballroom or whatever. I can't necessarily say they have one of those, but I mean, it's there, right? You guys see the connection.
It must be, yeah.
So this took a turn for the worse starting in the 1930s in Overtown, where a developer named George Barrick and others proposed to, quote, removing every Negro family from the city limits. And slum clearance provided the best opportunity for them to do so using transportation. And by 1965, half the population was out with the construction of 3 highways, I-95, I-395, and State Highway like 836. And pretty much an interchange, 4-way interchange that this place, honestly, in my opinion, it's the most physically destructive of the highway plans that we've covered.
Right. And I think that we called it slum clearance.
Yeah.
Was just a way for the board, I suppose, to like clear room for the the local white elite.
Yeah.
In that area.
In Miami, they wanted to expand. Yeah. It's like, hey, look, fresh real estate.
Yeah.
But they didn't care about the people living there.
I believe it was they wanted to expand the boundaries of the business district. Yeah. So I mean,
and despite them thinking that, for habitants still think of Overtown as home. Out of the 300 businesses that were there, 40 still exist. So it's still there, but it's very.
It's not in its former glory.
No, not close to it.
And then I believe, like, is it half? Is it over half of the population that's living in poverty?
Yep.
I mean, there's another correlation between Rondo and Houston and Overtown. I mean,
there's a pattern going on here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's very apparent too. It's not like as much as they tried to sweep it under the rug, they didn't do a very good job.
Yeah, and similar to what they're doing here, the Florida Department of Transportation came out with a report in 2010 on alternatives for the highway. What to do. One was a no-build option. One was a tunnel, make it to a tunnel. At level.
Right, which is similar to the boulevard option, which we've discussed.
Which right now it's
in St. Paul.
Yeah, right now in Overtown it's like bridges over the ground. They just went with raising it more and adding lanes to it, which doesn't do anything for the people. It just does it to lower traffic, which again we discussed.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
It ain't working. Such despair.
Yeah.
Honestly.
It's bizarre. I mean, this is just pouring money into something that is really not going to help out the people who it's affecting. So another example, which we want to talk about, of this same thing, which has a history of problematic highway infrastructure and a present, which is being dealt with very poorly, we would say, by the government, is in Houston. And so in Houston, there are 2 neighborhoods which were highly affected by the highway, specifically by multiple highways. In fact, you have the Independence Heights neighborhood and you have the 5th Ward. And the Independence Heights was a neighborhood actually created in 1905, which was the first city in all of Texas, which was founded by African Americans. And so this again was another really important center for African Americans in Texas. And across the country, you can see this. And yet these towns were once again devastated by the highway infrastructure in the mid-1900s.
You said the only or the first?
The first. Not the only. There have been afterwards several.
Yeah, but that's a pretty big deal. Texas is very big. So.
Yeah, and in 1905, that's long ago, but also it probably happened much later than it should have.
Yeah. Now, Independence Heights was deemed a pathway for highway construction in the 1950s by Highway 610. What was it?
I-45.
The I-45, yeah. And they were built in tandem. And it pretty much surrounded Independence Heights, pretty much separating it from the rest of Houston. And presently, unfortunately, a new expansion plan is happening.
Right.
Costing $10 billion.
with a B.
With a B.
The B.
B.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a wow.
Used
$10
for
billion.
$10 billion.
That's more money than there are people on this planet.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
insane.
And this money is going to be put to good use. Expanding roads, frontage roads, carpool lanes, such and such.
Good use.
Good use.
Wait, hold on. Like actual good use?
No.
That makes sense.
Okay. I couldn't tell
Sarcasm
first. I
meter
couldn't tell
is
first.
ticking up.
Yeah.
I was like,
We're getting a little sarcastic in this episode. Now, an organization called Stop Texta is actively fighting against this. And there's a video they put out, or someone else put out, but they put it on a website.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to show that to you. So this video is silent. While this video is playing, I will read you the statistics. If this video is correct, the expansion will demolish 158 homes, 433 units of apartments, 340 businesses, 5 churches, and 2 schools. This is happening right now, guys. Yeah, so it's so bad that
It's gonna happen.
the Harris County, which is the county Houston did,
right.
Yeah.
filed a federal lawsuit.
Yeah.
So,
But don't worry, guys. There was a settlement for the lawsuit, and everything's going to be all good because now my sarcasm meter is really ticking up because the Department of Transportation was now allowed to go on with the project. They'll be starting it in 2024,
this year?
which is now, and they have agreed to the concession of they will take more input from the community next time.
Next time. After the $10 billion.
there will be a next time.
They'll be
I
They'll be listening to the community. Also, they agreed to give a substantial amount of money to people who are being displaced. This is a $10 billion project,
Right.
and the total amount of money allocated to help people is $30 million.
You mean 30 billion?
No.
30 million?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
A tiny fraction, which will not necessarily be nearly enough.
So they've accepted, hey, this will displace people. This will cause some real damage. Here's $30 million.
Here's
Right.
money to make up for your home that's being destroyed.
In the name of reducing traffic.
And this was only after they were sued. And it's, 30 million out of 10 billion. So, this just goes to show you where the priorities lie. And I think the goal of us here today is to kind of shift the focus, or at least engage people and help them understand what is going on and how we can potentially think about solutions to this, as in not investing in expanding highways, but thinking about how to reduce highways' impact and recover from the impacts that they've had in the past and switch to kind of a more sustainable way of going about transportation that can benefit communities like here in Rondo.
Now, I just want to be fair. It's not, the $30 million is not only displacement funds. It's for green space, bike paths,
Right.
Oh.
and other stuff. So it's not just for the people who got displaced. It's for other things.
Right.
And this just shows that we got to choose the right plan here in Rondo.
Yeah.
It can't be for what the government wants. It has to be what we want, what Rondo wants, what the communities around I-94 want. And doing that here, it can give the first example that when a community comes together, they propose an idea that's for them, it can work. And not have someone come down on them and be like, hey, this is what's going to happen. Here's some money.
Right. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in, for listening, to hearing this history, thinking about our communities, and thinking about the future. And we'll be back next time to discuss more about Rondo and the land bridge and options for really working with the community to build a better one.
With a very special guest.
Yes, that is
Very
true. So
special.
you should be excited.
Yep.
And now before we end all this off, I would just like to put in perspective that last part. We mentioned billion with a B, and I feel like a lot of people don't realize the scale of that. So I have a little statistic pulled up. 1 million seconds is 11 days.
Right.
You know, it's about 11 days.
Right.
1 billion seconds is a little over 31 years.
Damn. That's a lot.
Yeah.
And that's just 1 billion.
Oh.
10 billion seconds would be 370 years.
Yeah.
You do the math.
We'll see you next time.
It's for the viewers.
Thank you for watching our podcast. If you like what you see, give us a like, hit that subscribe button, and click that notification bell to get notified when we put out new podcast episodes.